Mark Benson thought running out of gas would be the worst part of his night, but when he stepped into the fog to find help, something stepped out to find him. Now, stranded on a forgotten road with a full tank that won't let him leave, Mark is about to learn that some stations never close, and some passengers never leave the car. The road ahead was a black river swallowing everything. My headlights barely touched the edges of the cracked asphalt before fading into the fog. I had been driving for hours, chasing the promise of civilization on a map that felt more like a lie with every passing mile. The dashboard light glowed weakly, and my fuel gauge was dipping dangerously close to empty. I told myself I'd make it to the next town, that the next turn or the next hill would reveal some sign of life. A light, a gas station, anything. But the road only stretched further into emptiness. The silence was oppressive. My phone had lost its signal 2 hours ago, and the only sound was the low hum of the engine and the occasional rattle of something loose in the trunk. The night outside seemed too quiet, like the world had gone still, waiting for me to stop. Every few minutes I glanced at the fuel gauge, willing it to move back up. It didn't. The warning light came on just as I passed a crooked road sign, its letters eaten away by time and rust. I could barely make out the words, something about service and gas, but the arrow pointed straight ahead. Relief fluttered in my chest. I pressed on, though the fuel light glowed brighter, mocking me. The road curved, twisted, then stretched into a straight line that disappeared into darkness. I drove slower, half expecting the tank to give up at any moment. And then, with a shudder, it did. The engine coughed once, twice, and went silent. The headlights dimmed until they blinked out completely, leaving me stranded in a sea of black. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The air inside the car felt too still. I could hear my own breathing, shallow and fast. Outside there was nothing, no wind, no crickets, no hum of distant cars. Just silence. I took a deep breath and stepped out, the door creaking loudly as if protesting. The night air was thick, damp, and smelled faintly of rust and something else, something like wet soil or decay. My shoes crunched against gravel as I walked around the car. The fog hung low, swallowing the road just a few feet ahead. My flashlight flickered weakly when I turned it on, the beam trembling across the hood and down the side of the car. Then I noticed something strange. The back window of my car was smeared with prints, long wet streaks running across the glass. At first I thought it was condensation, but when I got closer my stomach twisted. They were fingerprints, human fingerprints, dozens of them, some pressed so hard into the fogged glass that I could see the patterns clearly. I stumbled back, my mind racing. I'd been alone the whole time. The doors had been locked. No one could have gotten in. I leaned closer again, tracing the shape of one of the prints with the beam of light, and froze. The streaks weren't just on the outside, they were on the inside of the glass. The sight of those fingerprints left me paralyzed. My mind kept trying to piece together some explanation, anything that made sense, but there was none. I stared at the glass for what felt like forever, expecting them to fade, but they didn't. The prints were fresh, glistening under the weak glow of my flashlight. Someone, or something, had been inside my car. The thought sent a sharp chill down my spine. I forced myself to open the door, half hoping I'd find nothing unusual inside, that maybe my eyes had been tricking me. The seats were empty. The air inside felt stale, unnaturally cold. My bag was still on the passenger seat, untouched. I swept the flashlight across the floor, over the seats, into the small space behind them. Nothing. I leaned in to check the back seat, and that's when I noticed something else. The smell. A faint odor of something rotten, hidden beneath the scent of old fabric and gasoline. It clung to the air, faint but sharp enough to make my stomach twist. I backed out quickly, slamming the door. The echo of the sound carried too far, bouncing down the empty road. My light caught the outline of a narrow dirt path branching off just a few feet away from where my car had died. There was a small wooden sign near the entrance of the path, so worn that the letters had almost vanished. I moved closer, brushing off the dirt. Beneath the grime, 2 words stood out in faded red paint: gas station. The arrow pointed into the trees. Relief and dread tangled inside me. I didn't want to leave the car, but I couldn't stay stranded here all night. My flashlight flickered again, but I pushed forward, stepping onto the dirt trail. The ground was soft, muffled by damp leaves. The woods swallowed the faint light of the road behind me until it disappeared completely. All I could see was the tunnel of trees ahead, their twisted branches reaching over me like skeletal arms. The deeper I went, the stranger it felt. The forest was silent, too silent. No wind, no rustling leaves, not even the sound of insects. Every crunch of my footsteps seemed to echo a second too long, like the sound was bouncing off something that wasn't really there. I started to feel watched, that creeping, invisible pressure built on my neck, the kind that made every instinct scream to turn around. When I did, the path behind me looked different. The trees seemed closer, their trunks bending slightly inward, as though closing the way back. I pressed on faster, the flashlight beam trembling as my heart raced. Then, through the fog and darkness, I saw a faint yellow glow. The outline of a small building emerged, an old gas station. One of the windows was boarded, another cracked. The sign above the pumps hung by a single chain, swinging lazily though there was no wind at all. I stepped closer, the dirt sticking to my shoes. My light caught something scrawled on the side of one of the old pumps, written in dark, sticky streaks. It wasn't paint. The words were uneven, scratched deep into the metal, dripping down the side like something still fresh. It said, "Don't turn off the light." The first thing that hit me as I stepped inside the gas station was the stench. It was a heavy mix of mold, gasoline, and something older, something that reminded me of iron and decay. The air was thick, the kind that clings to your skin and makes every breath feel wrong. My flashlight beam wavered across the dusty shelves lined with cans and boxes that had long rotted away. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, echoing through the small, claustrophobic space. A single yellow bulb swung from the ceiling, flickering just enough to cast shifting shadows on the walls. The faint hum of electricity was the only sound besides my breathing. It felt like the building itself was holding its breath. I tried to focus on why I was here, to find gas, to get back on the road. But the deeper I went, the more I felt like I shouldn't have entered at all. Behind the counter sat an old metal cash register, rusted shut, and beside it, something that almost made me laugh from relief: a red gas can. It looked half full. The handle was covered in grime, but I didn't care. I reached for it, feeling the slick film of dirt against my fingers. That's when I heard it, breathing. It wasn't mine. It was faint at first, shallow and irregular, coming from the darkened room behind the counter. My hand froze mid-air. I turned the flashlight toward the sound, the beam cutting through dust motes hanging in the air. The half-open door behind the counter quivered slightly, as though someone had just brushed against it. The breathing grew louder, wet, uneven, and too close. I took a step back. The air felt heavier, pressing against my chest. The flashlight flickered once, then again. I raised it higher, aiming straight at the doorway, and the breathing stopped instantly. The silence that followed was worse. It was total. No hum from the light, no creak of the wood, no sound at all. Just the ringing in my ears and the hammering of my heart. For a few seconds, I convinced myself it was the wind, an animal, anything to explain it. But then came the scraping. A slow, deliberate sound like something heavy being dragged across the floor. It came closer to the door, pausing every few inches. My hands shook so badly the flashlight beam jumped across the walls. I stumbled backward, bumping into one of the shelves. The old bulb above me flickered wildly, and then, without warning, it went out completely. The darkness swallowed everything. In that single pitch-black instant, I saw something, only for a heartbeat, but it burned into my mind. A pale face, inches from mine, its eyes wide and unblinking, mouth stretched too far, teeth small and gray. Then the light snapped back on. The door was closed. The breathing was gone. The gas can had vanished from the floor, and scrawled across the dirty tiles in what looked like fresh blood were 4 new words, drawn with a shaking hand. "You turned it off." I bolted out of the gas station, my lungs burning as the cold air hit me like a wall. The night had thickened, the fog rolling across the ground in long, heavy ribbons that clung to my legs as I ran. My flashlight beam shook violently, bouncing off the trees as I stumbled down the dirt path toward the road. Every sound behind me felt amplified: the creak of the station door, the soft crunch of footsteps that weren't mine, and that faint dragging noise, growing steadily closer. I didn't dare look back. My heartbeat was pounding in my ears, drowning out everything else. The smell of gasoline mixed with something foul, something dead, and I could almost taste it in the air. The dirt path seemed longer than before, stretching endlessly. The fog pressed closer, thick as smoke, and for a terrifying moment, I couldn't see anything beyond the light's narrow reach. When I finally saw the outline of my car, relief washed over me so quickly it made me dizzy. I yanked open the driver's door and threw myself inside, slamming it shut and locking all 4 doors. My body trembled uncontrollably as I tried to catch my breath. The silence returned, swallowing the world outside. I gripped the steering wheel and stared into the mirror, expecting to see nothing but my own terrified reflection. Instead, I saw movement. Something was standing at the edge of the fog, near where the dirt path disappeared into the woods. Its shape was human, but wrong, taller, its limbs too long, arms dangling past its knees. It just stood there, motionless, the fog swirling around its legs. I couldn't make out a face, only a shadow where one should have been. The longer I looked, the colder it felt inside the car, like the air was being pulled out of it. Then, slowly, the figure tilted its head to one side, almost curious. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then, without touching anything, the dashboard lights flickered to life. The fuel gauge moved on its own, the needle climbing steadily until it pointed to full. My shaking hand hovered over the keys, but I hadn't even turned the ignition. The radio came on next, static spilling from the speakers. It was soft at first, then louder, almost rhythmic, like whispers trying to form words. I leaned forward, frozen. Beneath the static, I could make out faint breathing. Then a voice broke through, distorted, crackling, but unmistakable. It said my name. I dropped the flashlight, my hands slick with sweat. The voice repeated my name again, clearer this time, followed by a wet, rattling breath that didn't belong to me. The air inside the car grew heavier. My eyes darted to the mirror again. The shape outside was gone. The radio went silent. Then, from the back seat, inches behind my head, came a slow, deliberate exhale. It was cold enough that I could see my breath fog the windshield. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I just sat there, frozen, as the faint sound of something wet dragging across leather filled the car. The sound behind me grew louder, a slow, sticky drag like someone's hand sliding across the back seat. I didn't want to see it. My instincts screamed to run, but my body refused to move. The air inside the car was thick, each breath shallow and painful. I could feel eyes on me, not blinking, just watching. The rearview mirror reflected only darkness, but I knew something was there. I could sense it, its weight pressing against the back seat, its presence crawling closer, inch by inch. The locks on the doors clicked open on their own, one after another. My trembling hand shot out to press them down, but they lifted again as if an unseen hand were pulling them up from the other side. The radio hissed back to life, the static whispering faster now, like a dozen voices layered on top of each other. Beneath it, something faint, music, maybe. a soft, broken hum that rose and fell like an old lullaby. I turned the key, desperate. The engine roared to life on the first try, even though it had been dead before. The car shuddered, headlights snapping on, cutting through the fog ahead. I slammed my foot on the pedal, the tires spinning for a second before gripping the road. The car lurched forward, leaving the gas station and that thing behind, or so I thought. The road looked different now. The trees on either side were twisted, their shapes warped and bent, leaning inward like they were closing in. The headlights stretched too far ahead, lighting up pieces of road that seemed to vanish the moment I reached them. I kept driving, gripping the wheel so tightly that my hands hurt. My heart refused to slow down. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to get away, but the gas gauge began to move again. The needle fell, dropping faster than it ever should have, full to half, half to empty, within seconds. My throat went dry. The engine sputtered once, and the lights flickered. I pressed the pedal harder, whispering prayers in my head that I didn't even believe. The car gave a final cough and died, rolling to a stop in the middle of the fog-choked road. I sat there in silence. My ears rang from the sudden quiet. The world around me felt still, too still. Then I saw it. Just ahead in the mist, illuminated by the faint beam of my dying headlights. The same gas station, the same crooked sign swinging gently above it. My stomach dropped. The dirt path was there, my footprint still fresh in the mud leading right up to the door. I turned my head slowly toward the rearview mirror, praying to see only the empty back seat. But it wasn't empty. Something was sitting there. It looked like me. Same clothes, same face, but its skin was pale, stretched tight like paper. Its eyes were black, its lips twisted into a thin smile that didn't belong to any living person. It lifted one trembling hand, leaving long, wet streaks on the seat, and placed it on my shoulder. That S when I realized the smell of decay hadn't come from the woods or the station. It had been inside the car the entire time.